Begin the current Daf, Masechtas Eruvin Daf Lamed Vav. Begin in the second line Daf at the top of the Amud. We continue the discussion of the previous Daf regarding what's the halacha by sveikis together with chazakis regarding what's the halacha when you have a doubt regarding rabbinic law. She's co-sponsored by Kazvik and Chesko, Torah Anytime Daf Achaim. Appreciate everyone joining us for today's Daf. Some of these we're going to discuss in today's Daf are three suggestions how to resolve a contradiction in the laws of Rabbi Yossi regarding the halacha of Eruv when you have a suffix, we're going to say it's kosher, regarding mikvah when you have a suffix that it's going to be tamei. Additionally, the opinions of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir as relates to the laws of suffix Eruv, including cases that regarding food that has no chazaka, and also an interesting case we're going to discuss regarding food that's designated as kodesh for Friday or Shabbos. That actually relates to what's called the concept of berera, which is retroactive clarification regarding something that was from before Shabbos. What's the halacha going to be when it happens on Shabbos? Could we say that it was already as if it happened from before Shabbos? So the key terms, the concept we're going to have is yesh le'ikar min ha'Torah, that there is a halacha, even if it's rabbinic law, but if it has a biblical source, actually is more stringent regarding its halachas. The halacha of dimua, which is regular fruit that's mixed with truma or with tevel, and the concept of seif hayom or tchilas hayom koine eruv, that it's the question, when does an eruv take effect? Is it seif hayom, which is the end of erev Shabbos, or is it tchilas hayom, or is it actually the beginning of Shabbos? And finally, the concept, like we said, of berera, which is the effect of a yet unpredictable outcome. Do we say that is as if it was already something, let's say, that has to be done from before Shabbos, like an eruv? Do we say that really, although we don't know until it happens on Shabbos, but we say retroactively it was actually already on Shabbos? So begin the current Daf, Daf Lamed Vav Menaf. I'll take it if you have it. So we said that Kasha, the Gemara had brought in the previous Daf. There was a Mishnah, and there's we brought also a Mishnah Masechtas Mikvos. We have, says the Gemara, we have been discussing the halacha of Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to say Kasha de Rabbi Yossi. We have a difficulty with Rabbi Yossi. Rashi calls it a brayso. It's really the Mishnah Masechtas Mikvos that we had learned regarding the a suffix of if something's tevel, or if regarding someone had immersed or had not immersed in the mikvah, regarding rabbinic tama. We had mentioned this was we mentioned a Mishnah on the previous Daf. We had said regarding if someone had a suffix, we had asked regarding Rabbi Meir regarding a suffix of rabbinic law. I guess to verify, we had said Rabbi Meir said in the Mishnah that we had a machlekes in the Mishnah regarding if there's a suffix regarding the eruv. It's on? Oh, wow, that's strong. Okay. We had said regarding we had a suffix eruv. We said, let's say it rolled out of the tchum, or if something fell on it. So we had a machlekes in the Mishnah. What's the halacha going to be? Rabbi Meir was one of those opinions that said, we're going to go stringently. Yossi and Reb Shimon, they said that the suffix eruv is going to be kosher. So on the previous step, we discussed the contradiction regarding Rabbi Meir. We said Rabbi Meir is going to be stringent. We brought a Mishnah that says in Mikvahs that Rabbi Meir actually, he says that you go leniently. Now, we had mentioned then when we did the previous stuff that we're going to ask a contradiction in Rabbi Yossi too. Because Rabbi Yossi, in that same Mishnah regarding suffix tavel, suffix late tavel, which we're not sure if he immersed himself in the mikvah or not, that's going by rabbinic tumah, because we said the person, he's tamei. We said, how does he have a tumah kala? He says, and all these different things, which that's rabbinic tumah. A person cannot become tamei from a food act, so it's rabbinic tumah. So in that, so we showed Rabbi Meir was being stringent, so we asked Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Yossi, in that Mishnah, he says that the person is going to be tamei. That's a difficulty of Rabbi Yossi, because in our Mishnah he says that actually suffix eruv is going to be kosher, even if you're going to say tchumen is rabbinic, but still that's a contradiction in the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. So in Mikvahs, he says that the tefillah, the suffix is going to be tamei when it's only tamei rabbanan. In our Mishnah, when it's regarding the laws of suffix eruv, he says it's going to be kosher. So how does he hold regarding a suffix rabbanan? Are you going to go to kula, or are you going to go l'chora? So that Rav Huna bar Chena, he says that shali tumah. Tumah is different. It's actually going to be more stringent. Hol v'yesh le'ikar min ha'Torah. Since it has the laws of tumah are biblical, so therefore we're going to be stringent when you have a doubt regarding the immersion of the person, and even by a suffix of tumah rabbanan, there's rabbinic tumah too. We're going to be stringent because we don't want to go ahead and act lightly regarding a suffix tefillah that's going to happen in the case of the biblical tumah. So since the laws of tumah have a biblical source, even when it's rabbinic, we're going to go l'chumah. Says the Gemara, well, Shabbos namid deraisi, and as Rashi explains, the Gemara's question is on tchumen. In other words, the Gemara is essentially asking that, like Rabbi Kiva says in Masechta Seita, that tchumen is also biblical. So we should be chomer, we should be machmer by Eruv too. Why is Eruv going to be any different? That says the Gemara, no, so Rabbi Yisrael is tchumen drabanan. Tchumen is rabbinic. And as Rashi explains, wait a second, so why do you say also Shabbos also has a biblical source? It's not applicable to say that if we're going to be lax regarding Eruv, they're going to be lax regarding other sveikas like by Malach of Shabbos, because you can't compare Malachas to Tchumen. Tchumen is a law that applies on Shabbos, but it's not a big problem as Malachas. So you can't say we're going to be lax regarding Tchumen, that you're going to be lax regarding Malachas. But by Tumas, they all seem the same thing. There's a Av, there's a Rishon, there's a Sheni. We're going to be leaning regarding rabbinic. We might come to be leaning regarding biblical, and therefore that's why we're more machmer by Tchumen. That's one interpretation. Second interpretation the Gemara gives is that if you want, you could say that this Mishnah in Masechtas Mikvos is the day. It's his own teaching. You're right. According to him, he's stringent even by a suffix drabanan, and that's why by Mikvos he says the suffix tavel, suffix tavel is going to be tummy. In our Mishnah is the Rabbi, is a teaching in the name of his teacher of Avtomas. And says actually precise reading indicates this because of Rabbi Yisi. He says, these are the words of the Mishnah, our Mishnah of Eruv. He says, Avtomas, hey, Misham Chamisha Zekanim. Avtomas is testifying in the name of 5 elders, Shasavik Eruv Kasher, that a doubtful Eruv to be Kasher, Shlamina, that obviously it's not Rabbi Yisi's own teaching. Rabbi Yisi says, Avtomas, hey. So that's the second approach regarding to answer if we're being machmer, being makel by a Savik Rabban. Then the Gemara brings a third interpretation. Rambam, he says, Hasam, in the time of Rabbi Yisi, he says, by the Mishnah Masechtas Mikvos that it's being stringent. You're right. As we see in our Mishnah, he's actually lenient regarding rabbinic law. But over there, he's being machmer because you say a concept of hemed tami al cheskosim. You say that the tummy person retains his original stringency, which the aim of leitavul, and say that he didn't immerse. As Rashi explains, all of his chazakas are telling us stringently, and we have no chazakas telling us leniently. Conscious to Allah of the Mishnah, there's chazaka leniently and stringently, where you say that the person, he has a chazaka regarding the tchum of his house, and say, okay, but he didn't make an erev. But you could also say that the truma has its chazaka, that it was tar, that it was a valid erev. And since it's rabbinic law, so we're going to go leniently. But in the case of mikvahs, there's only one chazaka. There's the chazaka that the person was tameh. We're not sure was he matar, was he tayl or not. Then we're going to say, tameh al chaskasai, and there's going to be tameh. So then the Gemara says, wait a second, to the contrary. Hemed mikvah chaskasai, like we said the last year, we said it's going to get a little more complicated over here with chazakas. The Gemara says, wait a second. You're saying not sure if you're tayl or not, because you're not sure if it was a valid mikvah. What do you mean? Hemed mikvah chaskasai. The mikvah has its own chazakas that it's kasher. They will let chasas say the mikvah is not missing anything, and if there was a valid tefillah, so why are you saying that there's only a chazaka of tumah, and therefore we're going to say lo chumrah? So the Gemara the mikvah shleimin, the tumah mikvah that wasn't ever, the way Rashi translates it, ever measured even in the beginning, and therefore never had a cheskes kashrus. So you don't know ever if the mikvah was kasher or not. And now we have the suffix, therefore you only have one chazaka of lo chumrah, and therefore we're going to be machmer. So those are the 3 different approaches to resolve the contradiction. Rabbi Yisi, does he hold the suffix of a suffix of Rabban is Melchumra or going to be Lakula? Now the Gemara says a few points relating to the machlekes of Meir and Rabbi Yisi regarding a suffix erev. First, it clarifies the opinion of Rabbi Yisi. Tanya Linda Brisa. Ketzad Rabbi Yisi, how did Rabbi Yisi say suffix erev kasher? Again, we had the machlekes in the Mishnah regarding suffix erev was kasher or not. And that says the Gemara. When did he say that a doubtful erev can kasher? He doesn't always say it. And that says the Gemara, erev b'truma, if someone made an erev with truma that was tar, but then at some point when he put it down, it became tamei. But suffix b'bayim nitnes, we're not sure that it happened when it was still day, and then obviously it wouldn't be a good erev. Suffix b'chekashek nitnes, we're not sure that it became tamei after it got dark. So then we say that by bein hashmoshes, by twilight, which when the erev takes effect, then it has its original chazaka, and then it was tar. And it only became tummy now after it became dark. That's where he says that there's going to be a chazaka only when there's a chazaka that the food was fit originally before it was put down. And the same thing would apply for the pays. So too regarding, let's say, a different case of produce of tevel, of untyped produce. Something we're not sure, did he go ahead and separate the appropriate types, the trumas and maisus after he put it down there, when it was still day? Something not sure did he do it when it was already going to be on Shabbos, and therefore the Erev did not take effect, because like the Mishnah taught, you can't do an Erev with tevel. Now the Gemara later on is going to ask, which should jump out at anyone looking at this case right now, say, wait a second, to the contrary, the case you're describing right now does not have a cheskes kashrus. Well, how could Rabbi Yossi say it's going to be kosher? To the contrary, you say hemit tevel al cheskasa. You say when you put it down, it was tevel. You're not sure were you mesakin it before Shabbos or not. The Gemara is going to address that question. But for that, the Gemara is saying, for now, the Brisa says there was Savik Erev kosher. These are two cases of a Savik Erev that's going to be kosher. Now, again, like we said, that's only if there was chazaka when you put it down. The question is, did you lose it or not? But let's say you made an Erev B'Truma Savik or Savik Tameya. Let's say before you put it down, there already was a Savik. So you never had a cheskes kashrus of the Erev ever at any point in time, because before you even put it down, it was already not sure if it was tummy or was tar. Let's say so to the case of produce. Safek niskin to safek like niskin. You're not sure, did you fix it or not? Ain't says safek Erev kosher. That's not going to be the case of quote unquote Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah of safek Erev kosher, because here you never had a chazak in the first place. But now the Gemara asks the question that was obvious. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Ma'ishna truma. What's the difference by the case of truma and the ratio, where you're not sure if it became tummy when it was still day or became tummy when it was dark? Which you said, okay, Rabbi Yossi is going to say that it's kosher because of the original chazaka that it had before you put it down. Oh, because Dami, you said him truma al chazkasa. You say, okay, the truma has its chazaka that was tar. The emet tayri, and you're going to say that's tar. So that's why we understand why that case is going to work, because it had a chazaka before you can put it down. The question is, but peiris nami, the case of the peiris, there also you're not sure did you fix it before it was Shabbos or when it was ready Shabbos. That also should remain with original chazaka. Its chazaka was that it was tevel, and therefore it should be puzzle. Hemet tevel al chazkasa, the tevel should remain with its chazaka. V'emalainis didn't say that it wasn't fixed because you put it down in the state of tevel. So the Gemara says you're right. Leitem is saving niskin. You have to change the words. Don't say that the doubt was that when you put it on tevel, you're not sure did you fix it. You fixed it, but you weren't there at the moment. You don't know when was Shabbos or not. Don't say that was the case. Because you're right, then it actually wouldn't be valid. That would be the hemet tevel al chaskasa. There's two interpretations in Rashi. Either nidmu, like it usually means in Shas, it was regular bona fide chulam, and then truma fell into it, and that what's called dimua. And this time it would hold like sumchis that said of chavav, you could not make an erev for Yisrael with truma. So therefore, since it became if it became dimua from before Shabbos, even though it's fit for Kahana, it wouldn't be an erev for him. Or another interpretation is nidmua here, unlike all the Shas, would mean that tevel fell into it. So it's not going to be fit even for a kohen. But be that as it may, it was valid. It had a chazak, it was regular chulam. But then, truma or tevel fell into it, but you're not sure, was it from before Shabbos, then it wouldn't be valid either. So we're not sure that it happened after it already was Shabbos. But again, there was a chazaka because it was valid chulam. Something then happened to it after you put it down. You're not sure that it happened before Shabbos or not. So therefore that's why it's going to be valid, and then it's just like the case of truma. But again, that's the essential element that Rabbi Yossi that the Gemara is trying to point out from this price of Rabbi Yossi. If it had a chazaka before you put it down, and then there was a suffix, then you had a cheskes kasha, then it's going to be valid there. But if the suffix happened before you ever put it down, so you never had a chazaka that's valid there, and then we're not going to say the halacha of suffix erev kosher. It's only when you had a chazaka that you're going to say that. Now the Gemara continues on this theme of the machlekes remain Rabbi Yossi regarding the halacha of Mishnah of suffix erev. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak Merapon. He asked the following question. He says, someone had in front of himself 2 loaves of bread. Achas temeya v'achas tahara. One was tamei, one was tahara. Now we're talking about truma. And v'amar, he said, he says, I want that the loaf of bread that's tahar should be an erev for me wherever it is. And he put both of them at the end of the tchum, meaning to where his erev should be. As Rashi points out, like we said, the loaves are of truma because it would be of chulin. So chulin that's tummy is actually permitted. Not every person eats his chulin in the state of tahara. But they're truma. Now, truma that's tahir is about there, truma that's tamei is not. So now what's the halacha? So the Gemara explains that this question would be both tibayler Meir, tibayler Rabbi Yossi. You could ask this question according to either opinion in the halacha of Mishnah regarding Sadik Erev. As the Gemara explains, To brother May, you could ask the according to May, I'd come to May Hasam. Where do we from May over there in the Mishnah that says that's not going to be an Erev, Galek, Tahira? Because there is no definitive Tahira Truma, because maybe it became Tamei from what was before Shabbos. Here there is a Tahir one. One of them is Tahir. So again, although this sounds like the case of Mishnah that you have a quote-unquote a suffix, but it's not the same type of suffix. In the Mishnah, the suffix, you don't have any definitive Tahira. Here you have one that's definitive, you just don't know which one it is, so maybe it's going to be about there. Dilma, maybe you could ask it from Rabbi Yasi. Even Rabbi Yasi, Loi Kama, he didn't say in the Mishnah that it's not going to be kosher, Elahasam. Why? The Isa, the Tahira, that in the case of the Mishnah, there it's going to be kosher, that because the Isa, the Tahira, if it is Tahira, so Yodala, meaning we said in the case of the Mishnah, it's a suffix. But if it is kosher, then you know which one it is, and you know which is your meal. And there's a suffix tuma. So that Rabbi Yossi says we're not going to make it invalid because it has the chazaka. But at least you know which one. But over here, he doesn't know which is his meal. So here it's a worse suffix. There at least you know which is your meal. We're going to say, suffix, we're not going to invalidate the chazaka. But here one's definitively tam, one's definitively tar, so therefore maybe it wouldn't be valid. That he says to him, according to either opinion, it's not going to be valid there. Why not? This is Allah we mentioned previously. You needed to have that it's a meal from before Shabbos. And it's not. Why not? Because you're not even, and Rashi says a big chiddush even for a mayor who's machmer by the case of Safek Erev. The Erev is nothing. And you're not even chamer gamo. Like we said, okay, you can only go in between. No. Because in the Mishnah, at least with the Suda Haruya, it's just that now we have a doubt. Here, you couldn't have eaten it an hour before Shabbos, 2 days before Shabbos. One is definitively Tama, one's definitively Tar. You can't eat any one of them. And because of that, it's not going to be an error according to either opinion. Now the Gemara continues and says, he says, Kikar Zu. He says regarding one loaf of bread on Erev Shabbos, he says, this loaf of bread, Hayom Chayim, today on Erev Shabbos, I want it to be unconsecrated. Tomorrow, Shabbos, I want it to be sanctified. And he says, I want my Erev to be with this loaf of bread. What's the halacha? Now, what's the question? Because since Bein HaShmashos is a period of doubt, we don't know if it's Friday or if it's Shabbos, so maybe we're concerned that maybe before the Erev takes effect in Bein HaShmashos, maybe the Hektish of Shabbos already took effect. And as we said in previous stuff, you cannot make an Erev Hektish because you can't have any benefit from it. Or maybe you don't say that. That's the question. He said to him, Eruvin Daf. It's going to be a valid Erev. Now, let's say the opposite type of case. Let's say it says, Hayom Kodesh. Today, Friday, I want it to be sanctified. It's Hektish. Tomorrow, on Shabbos, I want it to be unconsecrated. Now, how could we do that? On the monies that I have in my house. So it's going to be deconsecrated on the monies that I have in my house. He says, I want this to be me'er for me. What's the halacha going to be? In other words, do we say, once it reaches Bein HaShmashos, so then it's already Shabbos, and it loses its sanctity, and therefore the Erev is going to take effect, or maybe not. That's the question. So that Amalei said, in this case, ain't a Rubeir. It's not going to be on there. So now that's the Gemara. No. Wait a second. What's the difference? Bein HaShmashos is a time period of doubt. So what's the difference? Why in one case you're going leniently, and one case you're going stringently? So Amalei says, this is like a Talmudic terminology. It says, when you go ahead and you measure a core of salt on this thing, and you give it to me, then I'm going to tell you the reasoning. Which is many interpretations why he would say such a thing. But anyway, he explains like this. He says, in the first case, when he says, today it's unconsecrated. Tomorrow it's going to be consecrated. Now, again, by Bein HaShmashos is when the Erev is taking effect, it's a situation of doubt. Now, misveika, out of doubt, you cannot remove something from its original state, from its original chazaka. Lo nachta le kedusha. So it's not going to take effect the sanctity out of doubt, because it retains the original chazaka state, which was chayil. So the Erev is going to take effect. And the same thing for the Seifa in the opposite. Hayom Kodesh l'macha chayil, when he says today it should be holy and tomorrow it should be unconsecrated, misveika le pacha le kedusha seminei. Out of doubt, it's not going to remove the sanctity from it. Therefore, it's going to be hektish, and therefore it's not going to be a valid Erev. So essentially, Bein HaShmashos, out of doubt, a suffix does not remove from a cheskes kamal. Since the original state was chayil, it's going to be valid. Since the original state was kodesh, it's not going to be valid. So although Bein HaShmashos said,
why would he do that today and tomorrow?
Why would he do that? Great question. That's a myth question. This is how the Talmud puts it up. Maybe he has a cheshbon. He has a yard site. wants it to be Kodesh on that day, whatever this and that. Point is that day it's going to be hektish, and it's going to be chayil. That's going to be on your blog. So that's what's going to come down to regarding the laws of chazakas. Now, continuing on this theme, the Gemara brings a very interesting case. It's not nasa. Look at the Mishnah Masechtas Tful Yom that says like this: Login Tful Yom, a pitcher that itself is Tful Yom, which means to say that this pitcher was tummy. You tabled the pitcher. It didn't have hair shemesh yet, so it's a Tful Yom, which means it was immersed that day. Shemalom and Achava Shal Meiser. You filled up that pitcher from Meiser Rishon, which that Meiser Rishon, which itself was still tevel. What does it mean? How could Meiser Rishon be tevel? You didn't separate, the Levi didn't separate from that Meiser Rishon, Trumas Meiser. So if someone eats that Meiser Rishon, he's going to get the death penalty as if it was still tevel, because even Kahana can't eat it, because you didn't separate, it's considered untight, because you didn't separate the Trumas Meiser from the Meiser. So obviously it's not fit for an Erev. Now, regarding this picture of Tful Yom, when you immerse it, it itself does not invalidate, because a Tful Yom is permitted to touch Chulin and Meiser. This is very important. Chulin and Meiser doesn't invalidate. Now, Truma, it does invalidate. Now, although there's, so to speak, Truma inside the Meiser, but since it wasn't separated yet, so it doesn't have the status of Trumas Meiser yet in the Meiser. Now, the person says the following case. He says, Harei Zeh, he says, I want that what's inside this pitcher should be Trumas Meiser, should be the Truma of the Meiser, the 10th of the 10th, that should be for the rest of the barrel that you took from that Meiser, it should be the Trumas Meiser Likashetech, when it gets dark, when it's Shabbos, which is after Harav Shemesh, after sundown, which then it's going to be kosher to have Truma inside of it. Says the Mishnah, Dvarv Kayam. So it's valid, it's going to be Truma that's dark. Because after Likashetech, when it gets dark, it's already Tahar. And then the Truma that's inside, which was not Truma yet, because it was still the Meiser, but then it taking effect after Shabbos, so therefore it's going to be Truma Tahar, never made a tummy. Now here's where it relates to our sugi. The Mama, let's say he says, Iruvi Bezeh, he says, I want this to be my Eruv for me, because it's Truma Tahar. And that says the Mishnah Lo Yom. He hasn't said anything. Because when it was Bein HaShmashes, it was still tevel, it was still untight. So Rabbi says the following consequence. He says, this tells us that Soif HaYom must be that the end of the day. What do we mean the end of the day? The end of the day means to say, the beginning of Bein HaShmashes, which is the end of Erev Shabbos, must be that's when Kain Erev, that's when the Erev takes effect. And therefore the Erev is not going to be a valid Erev, because the end of the day of Erev Shabbos, it was still tevel, as you take to the base. This Avidah, you would think to say the beginning of the day, meaning don't get confused. Sefer Yom and Tchilas Yom. Sefer Yom is the end of Erev Shabbos. Because again, Bein HaShmashes, period of doubt. So which part of Bein HaShmashes is taking effect? So on that, the Gemara is proving. Rav is saying it must mean it's the beginning part of Bein HaShmashes, which is the end of Erev Shabbos. That's when the Erev takes effect. Because if you would think to say it's the beginning of the day of Shabbos, meaning the end of Bein HaShmashes, that's when kind of Erev, that's when the Erev takes effect. Now wait a second. He says that this should be a valid Erev for me. Why hasn't he said anything? It's happening at the end of Bein HaShmashes, when already at the beginning of Shabbos. Beginning of Shabbos, it's already a valid food item. It's Truma that's Tahira, and therefore it should be a valid Erev. Obviously, because you're saying it's Seif HaYom, which is before it was ever, it's still tevel. It only became not tevel, it became Truma when Shabbos started. Because we said you can't make a Truma from before Shabbos because it was tummy, the logan, the pitcher. It was only after it became dark. So obviously you say that Seif HaYom Kaina. That my Papa rejects it, says no, you could even say that the beginning of Shabbos when the Erev gets acquired. But the Insudarui, like same principle. You need to have that it could have been a meal from before Shabbos. So even if you say that it's taking effect, the Erev could take effect by Bein HaShmashes because it's Tchilas Hayom, it's the beginning of Shabbos when the Erev takes effect, and then it's already not tevel, it's already Truma because you have to wait till it gets Lishak Tefshach after Harav Shemesh to be Truma. But the thing is, it wasn't fit on Erev Shabbos. And that's when the halachas has to be Sudarim by Yom, and you don't have the Rebbe because obviously before Yom it was tevel, and if for that reason itself, it's not going to be valid Erev. Now we turn to the halacha of the next Mishnah, continue on the halachas of Erev, this time introducing the concept, like we said, of retroactive. Says the Mishnah, Matzna Adam Ali Ruva, a person can make a stipulation regarding his Eruv. In other words, a person can put two Eruvin, one at the end of 2,000 amas to the east of his house, and one 2,000 amas to the west of his house, or again, like we have here in the pictures, his city, house, same thing as we'll see in later Daf. So what he does is he puts two Eruvin. Vayman, he says like this. If the non-Jews come from the east and have to run away from them, say maybe the Meir, then it's going to be retroactively that my Eruv on the west should acquire from me, so now I could go 4,000 amas to the west. In Minah Meir, let's say they're going to come from the west, the Mizrach, my Eruv should be to the east. So either one will be able to choose on Shabbos, wherever the non-Jews come and try attacking him, he can go to the other one. Now, let's say come from either side. Okay, wherever I'm going to want to go, I'm going to go. So although they don't come till tomorrow, this is the concept of Yesh Breira. We say that retroactively it's verified that by Bein HaShmelshes, well, where was your Shabbos residence? Retroactively it's verified that it was on the other side. We didn't know when Shabbos started, but a person can make a stipulation and then retroactively it's verified where his Eruv was. And let's say loy bo, loy lekan, loy lekan. Let's say it says that, let's say it ends up happening that they don't come to either one. So then Harini Kimeni, he says that I want to be like the people of my city, that he could have 2,000 amas in every direction from the city, and that he doesn't have to gain on one side and lose on the other side. So again, he can make a stipulation whether he's going to come from one side or the other side, or from both sides, or from no sides. And either one, he's going to end up having whatever is the result on Shabbos because of the concept of Yesh Breira. Now, a similar type of a case, let's say in Bach Chacham in HaMizrach, let's say a sage, a Talmud Chacham comes from the east, out of the Tchum of the city, and he wants to go learn Torah from him, but right now he doesn't know where he's coming from. And tomorrow I'm going to hear from people where he's coming from, where he is, and I'm going to hear from them because they're going to be coming from their own Eruv. So he says, if he's coming from the east, Eruvin Daf, I want my Eruv to be on the east. Minah is coming from the west, Eruvin Daf, I want my Eruv to be on the west. Let's say he comes from this side or from this side. So wherever I'm going to want to go, that's where I'm going to go. Let's say let's say it doesn't come to either side. Then I want to be just like I am regular, like the people in my city, and not to gain more on one side and then to lose on the other side. So that, again, that's a valid option according to Tanakh. He just says regarding one of the cases, he says, the case of a bol lekan lekan, if let's say there's going to be one Talmud Chacham coming from the east, or one coming from the west, Tanakh said that you could choose whichever one, and that really disagrees. He says, if one of them was his teacher, then he has to go to his teacher and he can't go to the other Chacham because, as Rashi explains, we presume regarding that person that when the Eruv took effect, his intention was to have an acquisition of the Eruv that's on the side of his teacher. However, this person just didn't know which side it's going to be, but now that we know, it's going to be the one of the side of his Rebbe. Now, if I'm Hayushnein Rabbi, so let's say both of them are his teachers, okay, then he can go whichever one he wants to. But again, if one of them is his Rebbe, it's going to have to be that one. Now, interestingly, the Gemara just says that Kiyas Rabbi Yitzchak, and Yitzchak came Tani Ibcha Kul Masnin. He actually taught the Mishnah the exact opposite of our Mishnah, meaning he brought a brisa that says the exact opposite version. It has him running away from the Talmud Chacham, and he says if the Chacham is coming to the east, I want my Eruv to be the west. And regarding the non-Jews, he actually said that the side that the non-Jew is coming, that's the side that the Eruv should take effect. It says the Gemara Kasha Nachem Anachem Kasha Chacham Achacham. Are you running to the non-Jew or away? Are you running to the Chacham or away from the Chacham? It says it's not a contradiction. Nachem Anachem Lekasha, the case of the non-Jew is not difficult. Our Mishnah said you're running away from the Nachri is Befahagavna. It's talking about the tax collector. So you're running away from him. The Bryce is B'mori Damasa. It's talking about the mayor. We have to appease him, we have to scream, you're trying to appeal to him, so then you're running to the side that he is. So that's not a contradiction. So the case of the sage is also not difficult. The mission that says that you're running towards him to hear him is b'maisa pirki. There's someone who's giving a drasha in like a lecture where people want to go ahead and hear what this person has to say. The Bryce that says you're running away from the chacham is b'makri shema, is a school teacher who teaches how to daven, who essentially it's someone that you're not interested in hearing, and both Rashi explains that both the Brisa and the Mishnah, we're talking about that there's two coming on either side. The Mishnah is that both of them are lectures. And that's what we're saying, if the lecture comes to the east or to both sides, both of them are lectures, I'm going to go whichever one I want to, and then retroactively it's going to be verified that that's the one that he had in mind. Rabbi Yitzchak was saying that one of them was a Makri Shema, one of them was a school teacher who's going to the east. Then he says, I want mine to be to the west, to the lecture. So if the school teacher's coming to the west, I want my Erev to be to the east where the lecture is. They come, but what is Bo Lakan Lakan? If both of them are lecturers, or both of them are school teachers, then L'mokum She'er Tzeiach. But Rashi just explained that this that you don't want to go to L'Marka Shema is that one of them is a lecturer and one of them is a school teacher. That's the one that you're running away from. Now, in the Mishnah we said that Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he said, if one of them was his teacher, then the halacha is going to be going to the teacher. Just interestingly, the Gemara says, Rabbanan, that disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, says, no, even if one of them is his teacher, that you go whichever one you want to, sometimes you're going to prefer your colleagues more than your teacher, and therefore you could even say brayer even in such a case. Now, Amar Rav says, he says that we don't have this halacha of the Mishnah, which we said that according to Yehuda, if both of them were his teachers, that you can go whichever one you want to. Obviously, you see that according to Yehuda, you would hold a breira because yesterday, you're saying that yesterday the Erev took effect. It just now we're verifying which one it is, and we're saying retroactively it's clarified that that's the one you had in mind yesterday. So this Mishnah says the Gemara Rav is not the correct interpretation. And how do we know this? From the fact that we learned a brisa from Ayu. In other words, since Ayu taught a brisa that is not the case, so it's not going to be the case. Which is the Tani Ayu. Ayu is the name of a sage. He taught the following brisa, and there you could see that our Mishnah's version of Yehuda is not correct. Because Yehuda, he says, the person cannot make a stipulation on two different things at the same time. In other words, which is essentially the case of Mishnah Balakan Lakan. One sage is coming to the east, one's coming to the west. So you say, okay, wherever I want to go, I'm going to go. Says Aye in the name of Yehuda, you cannot do that. It's only if there's one sage. If you say he's coming to the east, I want it to be to the east. And if he's coming to the west, I want it to be to the west. Where there, as Rashi explains it, the brayer is only on one person. He just doesn't know where he's going to be. He can stipulate and say, oh, okay, then I want it to be like that. But if it's regarding both sides, when there's two chachamim, then you cannot say that it's going to be valid. And therefore you see, Ayah is clearly not like the Mishnah, where you don't say brayer in the case of Balakan Lakan. Now, says the Gemara, wait a second. How do we understand this? Why is it when you're saying on either side that's not going to take effect because he's making himself dependent on whichever he's going to go, you see the whole it's not going to work because they ain't brayer. Obviously, because you can't say retroactive clarification. Tomorrow, when you say that, oh, I want to go with that chacham as to the east or to the west, we say, wait, maybe yesterday when the Erev took effect, you didn't have a mind on this chacham, it's for the other one. So then ask the Gemara, what's the difference? Then even to the east or the west, when let's say there's only one sage that comes also, you should also say ein breira. You should also say that it shouldn't be retroactively verified. Which is, as Rashi explains, the Gemara at this point assumes that Bein Hashmashas, the chacham didn't come yet to the east or to the west. So, meaning, how's that possible? The chacham, when Shabbos is starting, is 6,000 minus 2 amas from the city. After Shabbos, he walked another 2,000 amas, and he came back, because he's allowed to walk 2,000 amas, and then he came within 4,000 amas of the city. The guy puts his Erev, and he makes himself dependent on the sage to say, depending where the sage is coming from, I want my Erev to be, and if it doesn't come anywhere, I don't want it to be anywhere, I want to be like the people in my city, and there shouldn't be an Erev. Tomorrow he hears that the chacham came to the east. What do I mean? Are we going to say that at the time the Erev took effect, that the sage had a mind to go into the 4,000 amas of the city? Maybe the chacham didn't have a mind to budge from where he is. And if he wouldn't have came in, it would have been beyond, even with the Erev, 4,000 amas, and then the guy's Erev wouldn't take effect. So how could we be to say that in that case, even according to Ayah, it's going to take effect? Obviously, because you're saying retroactively, it's being verified that that's the side where the chacham is coming, that's where he wants to be. So then it says the Gemara, then what's the difference? Why over there you're going to say yes breira, and when there's two Tamil Chacham, you're going to say ain't breira? So Rabbi Shloimy actually says it's not true. The case of Ayah is talking about that the sage already came Bein Hashmashas. This guy just didn't know. He didn't have WhatsApp, whatever. He didn't know before Shabbos if his Chacham came or not. Tomorrow he ends up hearing about it in Shul, and what that's called, the way Rashi says, it's just called Gilu Milsa Ba'alma. It's just a verification that he now finds out that the Erev that he did was good. But not because it's relying on the verification of Suffolk, it was a definitive kinyan. Because he said to the side that the Chacham is going to come, I want my Erev to take effect. And the Chacham already did come before Shabbos, and therefore it is a valid Erev, and therefore, yes, Ayah is saying that we say ein breira. We don't say breira. So why does it work when there's one chacham? Because in that case of the chacham is that he really came from before Shabbos. It's just a gilul nos alma. But then the Gemara says, wait a second. Adrabah, to the contrary. Lesel da'ayim imasnim. Why are you saying that the Mishnah's version is not correct because of Ayah? I mean, the Mishnah is primary. Ayah is teaching a brisa. So we should say that Rabbi Yehuda holds yesh brera and say Ayah's version is incorrect to say ein brera. And that's the Gemara. No, you can't entertain to say that Ayah's version is incorrect. Because we learned in another Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda holds the lesle brera, that you don't know the brera. That's not like the Mishnah said this demai. The Mishnah says, if someone buys wine from amongst the Kufians, which Rashi explains, the Kufians were a group that the Assyrian king came and brought from Kufi, and that they settled parts of Eretz Yisrael. So this was before they made a gzera on their wine, like the Gemara says in Chulun. Now the thing is, Kufians, however, did generally not separate trumas. Now this guy who bought the wine from the Kufians, he doesn't have any vessels to separate the trumas and maises into them, but he bought the bottle of wine from the Kufians. So what does he do? So on that says the Gemara on top of Lamed Zayin and Aleph, he says like this: Shnei lugin shani asa lahafresh, the 2 lugin of truma that I'm going to separate from the 100, because usually you do a ratio of 50 to 1. So the 2 lugin out of the 100 that I'm going to separate, harehain, they're right now inside truma. So the truma is separated but inside of it. Asar ma'aserishin, a tenth of it is the ma'aserishin. Tisha ma'aser, and the remaining, because you take a second type, which now you have 90, because you already took 10 of the ma'aserishin. So a tenth of that is 9. 9 of it should be Ma'aser Sheni. Umeichel, and the Ma'aser Sheni is deconsecrated, because as Rashi explained, you could fix it right away. After you designate the title Ma'aser Sheni inside of it, you could deconsecrate Ma'aser Sheni on money wherever you have it, and you're mechal right away, you deconsecrate it. And then you go ahead and you drink that wine right away, and later, when you leave a little bit at the end of the wine, then you'll separate the truma and ma'aser, and you'll say that retroactively is verified that was the truma that you'd separate inside the wine. That's the Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yisrael, Shimon, Oisin, they say it's forbidden. The Gemara at this point assumes that the reason of Rabbi Yehuda would be because he disagrees with Rabbi Meir to say brera, and he holds ein brera. So obviously that Ayah's version is correct. That you see Rabbi Yehuda holds ein brera, you cannot say retroactive clarification on the wine, and therefore Rab said that our Mishnah's version of Yehuda is incorrect because he had said that if Chacham Bo Lekan you're going to say brera, it's not true. Yehuda holds ein brera, and therefore you have to say that our Mishnah's version is incorrect. Something that we spoke about today's Daf in Eruvin Daf Lamed Vav was we had a kasha. We had a difficulty with Rabbi Yossi because in the Mishnah Mesechus Mikvos, Rabbi Yossi had said that Safek Taval, someone we're not sure did he immerse or not, regarding Tumah D'Rabbanan, which we call in that Mishnah Tumah Kala, he's saying the suffix is going to be L'chuma. He's going to say he's going to be Tummy. The problem is, that's a kasha ad Rabbi Yossi, because in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi says suffix Eruv, that even if you say Tumah is D'Rabbanan, but he says it's going to be kasha, well that contradicts over here. He was going L'kula. The previous Daf we discussed Rabbi Meir, that we had a contradiction in him. Now we have the opposite contradiction in Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara has 3 approaches. No, Tumah is different. There you're going to go l'chumah. Why? Because there's an ikar min atayr. The laws of Tumah have a biblical source. Regarding Tumen, it's rabbinic. And as Rashi explains, it's not even similar to malacha to go ahead and start being goyzer one after the other. So therefore here he's going to go le'kul. That's the difference between Tumah and Chum. Or a second approach is halidei. When did we say, his own opinion, he's being machmer, even myself and Rabban, by the laws of Tumah. Our Mishnah was called the Rabbi. The Mishnah, he said, Omer Bisi of Tumas Heid. That's his Rabbi, and therefore that's why he holds that Savig is going to be kosher. It's not a contradiction, almost same one as his Rabbi. The third approach was that regarding Mikvayis, yes, there he's going to say the suffix is going to be L'chumah because you have a chazaka of Tameh. We're not sure, did he table or not? And whereas by Eruv, you have a suffix, was it valid or not? You have a chazaka l'kula and l'chumra. On the one hand, you say, okay, maybe it wasn't. On the other hand, you say, well, it was valid truma, that is tahara. So therefore, they're going to say that the suffix is going to be l'kula. Here you only have one chazaka, and it's telling you l'chumra. And wait a second, but why did you say there's a chazaka of the mikvah? And then the Gemara says, shalai nimdi mi'ilm was never measured. So you don't have the chazaka of the mikvah, you only have one chazaka l'chumra of the person that he was telling, and that's where you're going to go l'chumra in the case of mikvahs. Then the Bryce explained exactly the parameters of Rabbi Yossi, that he says suffix Erev is kosher, like he says in the Mishnah. So on that says the Bryce, that's only if it's a suffix, if it came tame after he had put it down over there. then you say that it had a chazaka beforehand. But if, let's say, before you put it down, then you already had the suffix, so then you didn't have a cheskes kashrus of the Erev ever, that's not going to be the case of suffix Erev kasher. It has to be that you had a cheskes kashrus. And so too, we said regarding another case of tikkun of truma, we ended up explaining that the case is talking about suffix v'oigim nidmo, not that suffix v'oigim niskinu as the original version, because then actually you would have a cheskes tavel. That wouldn't be valid. It was that it had a cheskes kashrus. And you put it down, and after you put it down, you're not sure when did the truma or the tevel fall into it. Was it before Shabbos or after Shabbos? That's going to be the halacha that it had a cheskes kashrus, and we're going to say stuff like Erev kashrus. Then we spoke about an interesting case. We said that if, let's say, you have 2 loaves of bread, one's tamei, one's tahar, so he said you could ask the question according to Rabbi Meir and according to Rabbi Yossi. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir says that it's not going to be valid because you don't have any definitive Torah. Here you have one that's definitively Torah, you just don't know which one it is. Maybe it's going to be valid Eruv. And you could also ask the question according to Rabbi Yossi. In the Mishnah, where he holds it is going to be kasher by a case of suffix. Yeah, because if it's Tar, which we're saying that it is because that's a cheskes kashrus, so then you know which one it is. Here, although it's also a case of suffix, but you don't know which one it is. And the Gemara says you're right, according to all of them, it's not going to be an Erev because you need a sidaru miba'id yon. And you don't have that over here because you don't know which one is this Tar one, so you technically don't have a meal, and then it's not going to be valid. Similarly, we said a case of, let's say that this loaf of bread, today should be unconsecrated and tomorrow should be consecrated. So in that case, we said it's going to be Erev, as ultimately explained, because again, bin hashmash is suffix. So when you have a suffix, you're not going to be removing it from its original chazaka. So it's not going to take effect kedusha because it's going to remain with its original chazaka, which was that it was chayil. And in the opposite case, today that it is kodesh and tomorrow it should be chayil, it's not going to be an Erev. Why? Because again, out of doubt, it's not going to remove the sanctity that it had because it retains the original chazaka, and it's not going to be valid Erev. Then we brought a Mishnah Sectus to Yom, that related back to a concept we said in the prior case before this last one, that you have a pitcher that's a Tvul Yom. So the pitcher is tamei, but you put it in the mikvah, but it didn't have Erev Shemesh yet. So it could come in contact with Chulam Meiser, but not with Truma. Now you filled it up from a barrel that had Meiser. You had a barrel of Meiser. That Levi had his Meiser. The thing is that Meiser was covered because that Meiser you didn't separate the Trumas Meiser from it yet. Now he says that this, what's in the pitcher, should be Trumas Meiser when it gets dark. Now when it gets dark, it's already going to be dark. Then the Truma could be inside of it. So it says the Mishnah Rav Kayamin, because that's valid. It's already tar by the time it's taking effect. So although it's really the Trumas Meiser already did, but since you didn't make it Trumas Meiser yet, it's not considered Trumas Meiser and it didn't make it tummy. And then the Mishnah says, if let's say I want this to be my Erev for me, then Lo Yom He hasn't said anything. So that the Rebbe says, this tells us, must be a Sleifa Yom of Erev Shabbos is when the Erev is taking effect. Why? Because if you think to say that it's Tchilas HaYom, which is the beginning of Shabbos, the end of Bein HaShmashos, wait a second, why isn't it valid Erev? At that point in time, it's already true Matayr. And that says the Gemara, no, you could even say Tchilas HaYom, the beginning of Shabbos is when the Erev takes effect. But like we said, you need to sit in the room of Ha'idon, and that you don't have, because it was temple at that point in time. Then we went to the next Mishnah, he said a person can stipulate on his Erev, and we brought 2 cases, a non-Jew and a Chacham. Actually, in the Braces said the exact opposite. We said that the non-Jew in the Mishnah you're running away from because he's a tax collector. In the Brace you're actually running towards him because he's the mayor. In the Chacham you're running towards him because he's a lecturer. In the Brace you're running away from him because he's Makri Shema, he's a school teacher, he's teaching how to daven. You don't want to be there. But be that as it may, you can make a stipulation for the east or to the west, or whichever one you want to choose. Rabbi Yehuda says, regarding the case of the Chacham, he says if one of them was his teacher, then we presume that's where it is and that's where you have to go. And the Gemara explains, no, sometimes you want your colleagues and not your teacher, so it's not definitive. Now, Rav said that our interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, which Mishnah's version, is not correct because you taught a brisa that shows the exact opposite. Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot make a stipulation on 2 things at the same time, which is if a chacham is coming to the east, one to the west, you cannot say, whichever one is going to be, obviously because it all ain't rare. And the truth is, the Gemara even says the same would be even one chacham. Truth is, even if he's coming to the east or to the west. So this that Ayi had agreed for one chacham to the east or to the west, that was because what we call kvar bal chacham. And Rashi explains it's just gilul milsa ba'alma. It's just retroactively showing you what was already there. It was a definitive kinyan, you just didn't know about it. So it was a valid kinyan. Now, so we say that, so you see from Ayi that you say ein brer, so that's not like our Mishnah. So wait a second, but maybe you should say, Ayah is incorrect because the Mishnah says no, it must be like Ayah because when the Mishnah says this demand, it says the same thing like Ayah. Because if you buy wine from Kuthians, so Rabbi Yehuda says it's forbidden, and this Rabbi Yehuda is one of the three opinions that says you're not allowed to separate Truma on what you're going to end up doing retroactively. You can't say that, oh, there's Truma and Meiser inside over here, and retroactively when I'm finished drinking, the stuff that I left on the bottom, obviously that was the Truma's Meiser. You can't do that. Remain holds you can do that. Another three Tanaim, which one of them is Rabbi Yehuda, obviously because they hold Ein Breira, and therefore you see Rabbi Yehuda holds Ein Breira, and therefore Ayah's version is correct, and therefore Lessa, with the Masnitin, our mission is incorrect, said Rav, and you have to hold like Ayah's version, and as the Gemara brought, and the mission says this Demai, and Rabbi Yehuda holds Ein Breira. Thank you for any time.